This is the Chewing the Cud podcast, a podcast for the UK dairy industry, brought to you from the southwest of England and listened to around the world. Hello and welcome to Chewing the Cud podcast. My name's Andrew Jones and with me as usual is...
Sarah Bolt.
How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm very well, thank you, Andrew. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Sun's been shining today, which is always a positive.
19 degrees or thereabouts, I'm led to believe, here in Somerset.
Blimey.
Sunny Somerset.
Sunny Somerset. I know, I was speaking to someone today that said they were in sunny Cornwall. I said, well, it's not too bad here in Dorset either. I think I was in Wiltshire at the time, but anyway.
Although it was 5 degrees this morning and we did have another frost. So, there's a bit of both.
I've got to be honest with you, I haven't seen a frost yet.
Well, when I say frost, it's slightly heavier than a dew, but not a, that sort of between dew and frost.
Anyway, we're back talking about the weather again.
I know.
Anyway, as this podcast comes out, will be the 1st of October, which for us here in the Southwest means it's the Southwest Dairy event. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. Be looking forward to that, Sarah?
Oh, it's one of my favourite of the year. I love it. It's right on our home turf, really, isn't it? Here in Somerset.
Exactly. It's our local one, isn't it? Let's be honest. And it's always I know plenty of people say to me, oh, you're going up to Dairy Day. And it's like, well, I'm seeing most of all the same people and probably more clients down here. So I always prefer to come down here than go to Dairy Day. So...
there's always a good lot of friendly faces to be seen anyway.
Exactly. So hopefully we'll see some of you. And obviously if you do see us, please come and say hello. Other than that, I think we've got an interesting topic today. And there's a couple of interesting facts come out of it, aren't there? And I mean, we're not trying to have a go at our industry because it's our industry, but it's just to make people sit up and think about their industry.
I think so. And I think it's such an important topic, whether it's our industry or whether it's actually when you're at home, going to the supermarket, walking down the street. If you come across somebody that needs first aid, I think it's just as important that we have these skills, across society. So, I think it's a really interesting...
I'm sure our guest won't mind sharing, but I do remember one time a woman collapsed in the house on the road, completely outside the house, and she just got out of the bath, so I had to go in and administer first aid just in a dressing gown. But that's another story for another day. But yes, so today we're talking about first aid. So let's go in and see what we've got to say. This podcast has been brought to you today by Chewing the Cud Limited, who offer completely independent dairy and beef nutrition, cow signals advice and training, along with ROMS mobility scoring. For more details on these and other services available, please visit our website www.chewingthecud.com or email us directly on nutrition@chewingthecud.com. Chewing the Cud Limited now offers first aid training from a registered first aid at work trainer and experienced minor injuries practitioner. For more details, please visit our website www.chewingthecud.com or email us directly on training@chewingthecud.com. Hello, I'm Andrew Jones.
And I'm Sarah Bolt.
And welcome to the Chewing the Cud podcast, a podcast for the UK dairy industry.
Farmer, advisor, processor, and everyone else. We have topics and episodes that will interest you.
We discuss the practical and the technical aspects of different UK dairy industry topics.
We aim to make you think about what you're doing and ask yourself, can it be done differently?
Listen to us speak with specialists from inside and outside the industry about their area of expertise.
Subscribe and listen to episodes for free on your favourite podcast platform.
Sign up to our website, www.chewingthecud.com, for podcast notifications so you never miss an episode.
And links to our socials, including Instagram, Chewing the Cud Podcast. All one word, and remember, no G.
Or email us direct on podcast@chewingthecud.com.
If you like what we do, please share and leave us a review to show your support. And that's it. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello and welcome back to Chewing the Cud podcast. And today our guest is talking about first aid and, a bit of health and safety in general. So, hello, Emma.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Sorry, this might be a bit awkward to everybody because this is my other half. So this is the poor woman that puts up with me. So sorry, Sarah, we won't turn this into a domestic.
Do I have to sort of referee on the side?
So yes, today Emma joined the business a couple of months ago and is offering training that some of you may have heard about via the brand of Tunicud Training. So Emma's here to talk about that a little bit, let's be honest, but also just the health and safety or the first aid side, that kind of thing in general. Because when we had Ollie, the fireman, on, I remember saying to him, "Oh, do you know anybody that might be able to talk about this?" And he said, "Oh, no, not really." And then obviously since then, things have changed. You've joined the business. You've become a registered first aid trainer. We're here to talk about that. So like usual, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to be where you are today.
I'm a registered nurse. I qualified in 2010. And I spent some time doing the rounds of the wards and everything as all nurses do, and then spent some time in A&E. And then after our second child was born, decided to leave A&E, went to work for 111 and then ended up in a minor injuries unit as well. And then we have been talking for a little while about the necessity for first aid on farms and how farmers can struggle to fit it in around the other necessary duties on a farm. And it just seemed to make sense that I go off and use my skills in a different way. You know, I'm already expected to teach as a nurse anyway. So going off and using those skills to be able to offer a different skill set and be able to offer support to farmers and offer that training to them in a way that is more flexible and more appropriate for them.
Well, exactly. We are trying to aim to agriculture, whether it's on farm or agriculture-related businesses. But I know the people we've spoken to since you came up with the idea have said, "Oh, that's a really good idea," because that's something that is maybe missing. Like all these things, once you start knowing you're doing it, you look and there's loads of people doing first aid. But in the past, I'd never even noticed. And I've even had a couple of clients say to me, "Oh, wouldn't even know where to start looking." So basically, Emma, I mean, I know when a few people heard about that you were doing this, they were quite keen. And, could we do one example? I'll be honest, I got asked was, I've been to a first aid training course and they spend half their time having breaks and this and that. Could we do it in 4 hours? And I came home that night, didn't know. It was actually the week you were doing the course. And you said, "No, I can't." So just, I suppose, really, what can or can't you tell us? Where does it all start? What are people expected to do? We've got to talk about the legislation, really, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my favourite part of the subject, but, the Health and Safety Worker Act is quite clear on the subject. To the point where in the 74 Act was revised in 1981 with a whole section on first aid at work, very, very specifically. And the NFU, for farmers particularly, have a really, really good section on their website about the subject for people who are actually interested in the legislation. But
how many of us genuinely are? Let's be honest. We do what we have to do because that's what we have to do.
Just tell us what we need to do and we'll get on and do it, isn't it? It's probably the attitude of most farmers.
But I think, farms have been largely left alone by Health and Safety Executive because they're small businesses. But I think as farming changes and develops, they are going to become bigger.
Well, they are becoming bigger. There's fewer and fewer dairy farms,
employing more people and therefore potentially more people at risk in a farming environment. So I think that, savvy farmers will realise that they are going to be more watched than they have been previously. They are more likely to get visits from the HSE to see what they're up to. And the regulations are clear. Farmers must have, or businesses, we're talking about farms today, but all businesses must have a first aid risk assessment undertaken. That should be documented. It should be available on the farm for anybody who needs to see it. The regulations say that they must have first aid equipment available and a space for first aid, which is something I think a lot of people don't think about.
No, they don't. Definitely not.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a dedicated space, but it should be a clean, calm, quiet environment where there can be some privacy.
So that's an interesting thing for a lot of farms, isn't it? I've not come across that one before.
Well,
that's news to me.
I was going to say likewise, and it's all making me think back, as you say, businesses, farming has changed. You know, growing up as a kid, mum, dad, couple of guys worked, and then as I got older myself, and then my year out from college, local farm, 7 staff, including the manager, and there was an accident book. And I clearly remember writing a couple of accidents I had in there. There was the HSE poster of what's expected. And I hate to say it now, this is 30 years later, how many of the, and no offense to anybody listening, but the mum and dad farms, the traditional family farms have that up. You don't see it. It's still only those bigger farms that have it, and they are getting more and more of them. I don't think they necessarily need to if they're not employing anybody, but still, it doesn't matter. That it still comes to health and safety and first aid and all of the rest.
I mean, law is one thing, but there's also, I suppose for want of a better word, a moral element to it as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Like the law would say, I think if you're employing one person, you have to consider those things. And if you're a family farm who's not technically employing anyone, maybe you don't have to. But would you ever forgive yourself if someone were harmed on your farm, whether an employee, a visitor, a consultant coming in to see you, all these, you might not be employing these people, but they're still coming onto the farm. And if they were injured and you couldn't support that.
Well, if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, farming is incredibly unsafe if you look at it from the HSE numbers. I'm sure you've probably got them somewhere to quote, haven't you? But I mean, you know, construction used to be really bad as well, but that's really turned itself around, and farming is still out there, not in a good way, as the leader in terms of accidents per population, or I'm not sure what the metric is.
So the 2023 figures is kind of the most recent I've seen. I know the 24 figures are out, but I haven't seen them. And in 2023, farming employed 1% of the working population in this country, but had 20% of the fatalities at work.
That's a huge figure, isn't it? And very sobering thought.
It's quite a scary thought, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, it is incredibly dangerous in terms of you're working with stock, you're working with machinery,
heights,
all
those kinds of things,
all of those sorts of things. It's chemicals.
Chemicals. I mean, COSH is huge, and you know,
COSH. What's COSH?
Oh, control of hazardous substances, something harmful to health, or something like that.
Control of substances hazardous to health.
That would be about right.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Something like that. People can Google if they really need to.
Yeah, hazardous and health. Two H's on the end, aren't they?
Yeah. Something like that. But yeah, it's a naturally very dangerous environment that if you're brought up on a farm, I'm not going to say blasé, but you're used to it then. It's normal. It's normal. Yes, that's the best way to do it. It's normal to have a tractor or this or that. And I mean, let's be honest, tractors these days are far, far bigger than when I grew up, the loader tractor was a Massey 165, which I then learnt to drive on when I was 12. And these days, that's just, they're so much bigger.
You're right. The biggest cause of injury on farm, you know, plus or minus death, the biggest cause of injury on farm is vehicles.
Yep.
I mean, I suppose also things like, you know, you want to think about the big vehicles, but actually what about the quad bikes and the little vehicles that again, almost look like toys, and people just bomb around the farm on because they're off land. They don't have to worry about protective equipment. And that is risky, dangerous.
Well, yes.
And I guess coming back to what you were saying about construction, that you go onto a construction site these days, or you don't go onto a construction site these days until you've been escorted on, past lots of signs, past all of those warnings. You're given safety equipment. You do the same thing on farm, and actually, we'd probably think that was a bit strange if that happened. But actually, perhaps that's where we should be looking at heading.
Like you say, you and I would not walk onto a construction site, but members of the public are constantly walking across your farm. They've got legal right of way across your footpaths, and you are actually going to have to be responsible for them if something happens.
Well, I mean, your example you were saying there about construction, I certainly remember telling you about it, wasn't it? I, earlier this year, was asked to go and take some silage samples from a biodigester site. And before I was even allowed on site, I had to sit down and watch like a 10-minute or whatever it was introduction video, had to be given safety equipment, had to be escorted from the office onto site to take the samples and then off. And I was probably on site less time than what I watched the video, in all honesty. But it was like, okay, this is, it was different, as you say, than what we're used to seeing in agriculture.
Children have to watch a safety video to go and play at jumping,
Well, yeah, exactly, yes. Yes,
and yet
if they want to go trampolining, they have to watch safety videos.
We wouldn't think twice about letting them have a wander across a farmer's field, or we quite regularly take them to the farm with the milk and they go and look at the animals, and we don't think twice about that. But actually, the risks there do exist. Yeah,
exactly. We're just so used to it, or I am, that I know sometimes myself I can be a bit blasé because it's what I've always seen. And I suppose, as much as I hate to say it, I'm getting older and I can't respond as quickly as maybe as what I could have in the past with walking around cattle and whatever, that in compared to what I may be used to and whatever. But yes, so as we say, agriculture is a dangerous industry.
Yeah, it really, really is. And it isn't keeping up with the times in terms of dealing with those hazards. It just isn't. And there, it's for cleverer people than us to decide why that is. But I'm sure that making things more accessible, finding ways for it to be easy to identify those risks and to manage those risks. It's human nature, isn't it? The easier it is to deal with a risk or to deal with anything, the more likely you are to do it.
But you say some I was going to say it's changed, because I remember hearing stories in the past when we went from a manual levers for the hydraulics to electronics. I remember hearing the story of a couple of older guys, I think, got their foot caught in the hitch and that because they couldn't fully, I don't know if understand is the right word, but didn't fully understand how to use the hitch electronically. Whereas in
that
the
lack
past,
of training, and it all comes into it. That training becomes an important part of health and safety.
It really does, doesn't it?
And actually thinking about, how do we train our staff when we get new staff or when we get new equipment on farm? How are we going to manage that training to make sure that everybody can use it safely?
I mean, I hate to mention it, but, obviously I work in the NHS and people are not allowed on a hospital ward until they have done an extensive package of training. It's usually 2 or 3 days of training before you're allowed onto a hospital ward. Now, a hospital ward we would generally think of as quite a safe environment. It's, there shouldn't be too many hazards around. And obviously some of that training is about confidentiality and care and those kinds of things. But a huge chunk of the training that new staff and existing staff have to do every year is health and safety, is fire, is all those things. And again, but we don't think about it. I mean, all small businesses, it's really tempting to sit here because we know that farming has bad numbers, but actually all small businesses are bad for this.
And I think it's because it's the industry that Andrew and I both know very well, that it's quite easy to pick examples from. But as you say, I think it's really good that you're pointing out it's not just farming.
No, we're not picking on farmers here at all.
Yeah,
it is small businesses in general, but farmers have bigger challenges.
Well, I know you're saying we're not picking on farmers, because obviously that's who our listeners are. We're not wanting to upset them, but we're trying to help make people aware of what is required. And while you say all small businesses are not the best, usually because it's one person trying to juggle 101 different things, not they have a dedicated person. Unfortunately, farming is the one with the fatalities.
Yeah, farming is the dangerous one, isn't it? I mean, these figures are poor in transport, they're poor in construction. The difference is that in agriculture, they've not been improved. In transport, lorry drivers, things like that, the numbers have improved over the years. Now, let's be honest, for transport businesses, I suspect that's a lot about what the vehicle manufacturers are doing.
Yep.
They're making their vehicles more safe.
Like cars, they've got safer. Yeah.
You can't make a cow any more safe than it was last year. You can't put bumpers on her, I suppose.
Well, you could make a safe, depends what your breeding is. Sometimes the breeding makes them less safe. I can tell you that from experience.
I'm sure you've got a podcast on that somewhere, Hann.
It's back to that training again, and actually the human side of it, rather than thinking about the livestock and the machinery. It's back to the humans that use that are around those livestock and machinery.
But also, I know myself, I look back at some things I've done in the past. Oh, just take me 2 seconds. I'll just do this. I'll just do that. I mean, I just think of a classic example, which I'd say was over the top. But I remember when I was in Victoria, we had a dairy inspector come in, and we had a 21,000 litre tank. And it was one of them, well, they're the standard these days, aren't they? Hatch on the top. And the guy said to me, do you ever go in there? I said, well, I've been in there once, I think, because the spray ball wasn't working, so I had to scrub it and then put a new spray ball in. Well, where's your safety equipment? Well, what safety equipment? And he wanted me to install hooks in the ceiling, to put ropes on, to put harnesses on. So if I go in there in a confined space, they could, if I collapse because of confined space, and God forbid anybody trying to pull me out, it could all be done. And it was like, well, that's a bit OTT, and probably is a bit OTT. Well, someone will tell me it's not OTT, but it's an example of, we think it's just normal. Other industries, you wouldn't in your life be allowed to do it.
And I guess sort of you and I, Andrew, are much more familiar with the dairy side of things, but you start looking at big grain silos and thinking of the accidents and incidents that can happen around those. And
well, I was thinking, since we've been talking, let's be honest, the deaths we hear of slurry.
Yeah.
Gases. Farming, sometimes you are jack of all trades, master of none in some ways, because you are the mechanic, you are the midwife, you are the paperwork, you do everything. You're not, in a lot of particularly family farms, you do everything. It's not a dedicated person that does just the tractor work or does just the milking. You're doing everything. So you are doing so many different jobs. You are open to so many different, what's the word I'm looking for? Risks. Yes, you're open to so many different risks because you're doing so many different things. So you, and it doesn't take much to be driving that tractor, be distracted because you're thinking about that cow that's calving or whatever it happens to be.
And you've driven into the pylon.
Yeah.
In the middle of the field that's been there for your entire life.
Yeah.
Hands up, it wasn't a pylon, it was only a telegraph pole.
It's usually me admitting things here, Sarah, not you.
And luckily, only an on-farm electric supply telephone pole rather than anything else.
I was actually thinking of the episode of the very famous documentary series that a gentleman may have driven his brand new tractor into a telegraph pole. With the kids the other day, didn't we?
Yes. You're not talking about Mr. Clarkson by any chance,
I was trying to be more subtle, but...
No, you don't worry about things like that. Let's be honest, we all saw it. It's, it's public knowledge. It's not like it's...
I mean, for me as a non-farming, I grew up in a town. I am a true townie. I'm a nurse. I have no real knowledge of farms beyond what you tell me. But I watch Clarkson, and how often does he injure himself? Now, mainly small stuff. But also, he's recently had a pneumonia. He's had a heart attack.
He's sorry, Jeremy, but you're on the elderly scale.
Side.
Elder, yes.
I mean,
lighter than I had
again, age takes a huge part in this. The statistics say that something like 40% of the injuries on farm are people over 60 or over 40. I can't remember off the top of my head. But the older you are on a farm, the more likely you are to injure yourself.
I assume it's still
in life.
Irrelevant, isn't it? Was the average age of a dairy farm is 53 56.
they always say, but I don't know if
It's
that's changed.
mid-late 50s then, definitely. It's the same as in Oz. Yeah.
And it's not just age, is it? It's tiredness.
Yeah.
You know, there's me admitting to my Telegraph pole incident, but, that was at the end of a day of going out with the slurry tanker all day, the last day across the field, same field, managed to miss
long hours early
managed to miss the pole every other journey across, but tired by the end of the day. And it kicks in. We know farmers do long hours.
Yeah. Nurses pay more on their car insurance because we crash our cars on the way home from work. This is absolutely known stuff, but it's known, so that makes it less forgivable, doesn't it?
It's so difficult, isn't it? It just adds to all those risks. It just adds to it, doesn't it?
But coming back to first aid and
what are we required to do then, I guess?
Okay, so the requirement under the First Aid at Work, the Health and Safety Act First Aid Regulations 1981, just to be specific, state that you must do risk assessments. I've mentioned it before. They are freely available on the internet.
NFU, I think you said, wasn't it?
NFU definitely do farm-specific ones, but you can find more general ones if maybe you've got a diversified farm or maybe you just don't feel it's quite right. You can write your own if you want to be clever, and I am sure you could probably ask AI to write you one in this day and age.
I was going to say the HSE website, whilst probably a lot of people don't want to visit it, but it has got some very good resources on there.
Yeah, and they'll be more generic but very specific, but very detailed. It doesn't. What they're asking you to look at is the risks on your property, who's coming onto your property. So, looking at your staff and looking at their physicality. We've mentioned age already. Have you got staff who are older? Have you got staff with disabilities? Do your children help out on the farm, or do you have farm visits? Do you do open farm Sunday? Taking those things into account is really, really important. That risk assessment will then feed into the recommendations, and they do become recommendations. The risk assessment isn't. The risk assessment is essential. They will fine you for not having one, but the recommendations are exactly that, and you can work that out. But what you're looking at is how many first aid kits you should have and where should they be. How many staff should you have trained in first aid? My reading is that really a high risk business should have one person with a full first aid at work course, which is the 3-day course. We'll come back to those later. Plus or minus some people with the 1-day course. If you've got kids on the farm, you should probably think about whether you should have a paediatric course as well in amongst your staff somewhere, because there are variations for children over adults. It also, like I say, we talked about the need to have a space for first aid. And it doesn't have to be a dedicated space, but you do need to have somewhere clean and tidy and calm and quiet and private, because actually, you might have injured somewhere quite unpleasant, or you might have medical conditions that you don't want to share with the world. Confidentiality is huge in health. And so having that space to discuss that if you are injured, to give your casualty the confidence to talk is really important.
It's a bit like making me think about one of Paul Harris's comments, wasn't it? He said, like, when he first went on farm, many farms didn't have a dedicated loo or whatever else. And it's kind of just building on top of that, isn't it?
And it's something I'd never thought of before.
No.
I mean, it could just be a corner of your staff room where you keep the first aid kit and a bottle of water, probably an eye splash kit. And if you're a bigger farmer and you want to think about big, clever technology like defibrillators and things, then great. Those are big investments. They're amazing and they are wonderful things to have, but start small and build up towards the bigger stuff if you want it. But just having that quiet corner somewhere that's away from the rest of the world, because actually also if you're involved in an accident, you're probably quite shocked, you're probably quite stressed, you just need some time to sort yourself out, and that might be all you need before you can get back to work. But the flip side is, and the thing we talk about a lot, is how really good quality first aid can get people back to work quicker. it's really tempting to want to just carry on through an injury. And the standard joke amongst A&E staff is, if you've got a farmer turn up, the first thing you ask him is why they're there, and the second thing you ask them is who sent them. And if they say, I've just got a bit of something sore, and no one sent me, then you call the resus team, because they're probably about to drop on the floor.
As I say, farmers are notorious. I mean, I know I've got a couple of clients myself, and they sort of say, "Oh yeah, I will end up in hospital." And right, where are you from? Dairy farm. Right, you're here for a reason. Right, let's not mess around.
No one sent you.
No.
All very stoic.
Yes.
Well, the cows have still got to be fed.
Still got to be milked or whatever it happens to be.
Exactly. Those things have still got to happen.
Well, I've taken an example of myself. I know myself. I remember when I was in Victoria, my one and only time in hospital, one night, I probably should have been in longer, but I checked myself out the next day because I was the only person that knew which cows had the cedars in and had to be taken out and whatever else. And there's me with like 40.
Would you not have written that down like a normal human being?
Well, no, because normally I would have, but it was just me, so I didn't worry about it because I wasn't expecting to be in hospital with a 40-degree temperature and whatever else.
Yes, but you could have written that down and sent it to your share farmer to deal with.
If only you knew about whiteboards at the time.
Well, yeah, exactly. But it was just me on the other part of the farm with 200 cows because it was the drought. I'd gone off 200 cows on another part of the farm to milk them and left the other 600 with somebody else. So that was why. But anyway, that's another story for another day.
And I guess going back to you, what you were saying there, Emma, about, an area where people can just go, sort of when I think of first aid, I think of those like real emergency big situations, but actually it could just be a small cut that just needs a plaster.
Well,
and just want to stop and put a plaster on and sit down somewhere clean.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, there's another classic example. I'll be blunt, it was James who's been on here as a guest, a neighbour from North Queensland. I remember him, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, many years ago. It was the old no blood, no sympathy. And his then, I don't know, son, 10, 11, whatever, gone and got the cows. Oh, my wrist hurts. Oh, no, you'll be fine. The cow had flicked the handlebars on the quad bike, hit the wrist and broke his wrist. 2 days later, he's still complaining, went and broken wrist. And it was just like, the no blood, no sympathy. We, as an industry, we're not the greatest at, things have got to get on, just don't worry about it.
And I'm a nurse. We're just as bad. Like there's no two ways about it. We are as bad. But the difference is that we know when we've taken a step too far on that road, our colleagues will point it out very clearly to us that we've taken a step too far on that road. Well, they used to say doctors and nurses are the worst patients, don't they? Oh, we're awful. I hate having doctors and nurses as patients.
They self-diagnose as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, and with the worst possible thing.
So back to sort of farms, and we've perhaps got our dedicated area and maybe a first aid box in that area. Is it worth perhaps thinking about what we might need in that first aid box? What are the regulations and what are the other good things to have in there?
Yeah, I mean, a first aid box, again, the regulations are very clear on what you should and shouldn't have according to the number of people it needs to serve. But essentially, you want plasters, something to clean with. Most first aid boxes will come with cleansing wipes. As a minor injuries nurse, I want you to clean with water. I want you to clean with cool running water for most wounds, because the wipes will only do so much. They won't get they won't get the muck off. If you've fallen over in the slurry pit,
they're almost surface.
Yeah.
Whereas water will get right in and clean it.
Yeah, exactly. Unless
it's like a wipe for a mastitis tube. Yeah. Won't really touch the surface.
No, exactly. It's and then you will have sort of iPads and wound bandages, triangular bandages.
Yeah, we're not talking electronic iPads here, are we?
No.
Sorry.
EYE. I didn't even consider that. And then that first aid kit should be dedicated to that equipment. They don't generally recommend having medication in a first aid kit. If you need to have medication on your farm, for example, if you've got someone who's asthmatic, less so. You might have some aspirin. If you've got someone with a heart condition, you might keep some aspirin close by. Or
what about EpiPen?
EpiPen, potentially, although generally, again, most of those things should be dedicated to the person. But if you were to have those things, maybe you did have someone who had an allergic reaction and needed an EpiPen, you might keep a spare for them nearby. That should be in a separate locked cabinet, but with an easy accessible key. Again, because you don't want the visiting school children to nip in and help themselves to it.
Maybe we're getting off track a bit, but what are some of the outcomes you've seen of good first aid?
Yeah, I mean, good first aid is amazing. And I think that it's really important to understand how much it can improve the world. You know, I know that farmers, everybody, small businesses worry about money. And you might think, oh, you know, spending hundreds of pounds on sending X number of my team on a first aid course, that's going to just be money down the drain. But actually, a really good example was a gentleman I saw in the minor injuries unit recently. He knows I'm going to talk about this, so it's fine. But he came in, he was actually a lorry driver, but an ex-farmer, which is why I laughed. He was in his lorry. He decided to make himself a pot noodle with some water he'd boiled in his in-lorry kettle-y thing. And he managed to pour the water on his foot. He decided that was fine. He stuck his shoes and socks back on and carried on with his day. Didn't really think about it. I think he said he might have poured a bit of water from a bottle over the foot. And he came in to us 4 or 5 days later with quite a significant infected burn on his foot that required him to go to the local burns unit. And, you know, it meant he wasn't driving his lorry the following day. And I haven't seen him since, but I suspect it was probably a good few weeks before he was back to work, which would have cost his boss money in covering his sick pay and all those kinds of things. And actually, if he had just taken that time out to get out of the lorry, find a cool tap somewhere, run that burn under cold running water, he almost certainly would have had quite a minor injury that would have meant he would have been back at work within an hour and probably with no ongoing problems. But he didn't know that. He didn't know about first aid. He wasn't with anyone to tell him to do that. So something that would have, you know, put him an hour late on one day probably meant that his boss was saddled with major problems further down the line that could have been prevented. So you've got the additional pain, the additional illness he went through, the risk to his life that put to him because, you know, skin infections do kill from time to time. They do lead to sepsis and they do kill people. You've got that sort of health and moral angle, but you've also got a huge financial burden that could have been prevented by really good first aid. And burns are a really classic example of that.
Well, this is maybe not burns or first aid. I don't know if it would have helped it, but also people need the time to recover, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you're saying he's going to need time. This is an example. I'm sure I've told this story to a few people, and I'm sure most people who hear this will think I'm telling complete porky pies. Absolutely made up. Knew a guy in far north Queensland. When I met him, well, he was a character. Let's just say if we hadn't had rain for 3 days, we had a drought. Mm-hmm. And that's the polite way of putting it. Former woodcutter, then dairy farmer. But when I met him, he had a wooden leg, or a peg leg, I should say. And again, you're going to say this is all rubbish. But he had, story goes, he had a infection in his big toe, turned to gangrene, went to hospital, took off the big toe. He didn't rest. Gangrene got in his foot. So it went in his foot, took his foot off, and he didn't rest. Went into his lower leg. Took his lower leg off. Again, they told him to rest. He didn't rest. Went into his upper leg. And he thought somebody would have twigged whether him or the hospital. He went to hospital, what would that be? 1, 2, 3. The 4th time, they took it off at the groin and they kept him in hospital to ensure that he rested, because they said if it goes any further, there's not a lot we can do. Now, people will go, that's just a load of rubbish, because who's that stupid? But this was a true story, and the guy had a peg leg, and that's what it all came down to.
And it's just sometimes that needs must. He might have been,
Yes,
felt that he needed to get back to the business or whatever. And we can understand that farmers would be in a very similar situation that,
you feel
it's no good. I can't sit at home doing nothing when I know that job needs to be done. And
funnily enough,
I promise that isn't just farmers.
No,
but every person I tell to, your injury needs rest, will go, well, I can't rest. That is the conversation I have 20 times a day.
Well, let's be honest. I was just going to say the example of myself. When I broke my ankle last year, I didn't really rest until 6 weeks later because I was like, I've got these things to do. I've got to do. And I kept doing them, even though that's when I probably should have rested.
We all learn.
Well, yeah, maybe. I know. But yeah, she sits there laughing.
Well, there's no point, is there? I didn't win at the time. I'm not going to win now.
Well, it's done now, isn't it?
So alongside the first aid kit, we've mentioned the accident book. Can you tell us a little bit more about sort of regulations around accident books and what we do and don't need to put in there?
Well, I mean, again, accident books, with a very, very simple internet search, you can find hundreds of examples. You don't need to...
Well, you probably just go online and buy one if you really
Yeah,
want
I mean, you
to.
absolutely can. They sell them on the very large book selling site that sells everything other than books now.
Well, the one that employs Mr. Clarkson to make his television program.
That one actually.
Yeah.
You can absolutely buy them, but you could. It doesn't need to be complicated. Open a Word document and save all your accidents in a Word document. Don't overcomplicate things that don't need to be. Have a diary and write down. All you really need to be documenting is who it was, what happened, who was present, and what treatment was given. Should really be filled out by the first aider that supported them at the time. And it is the first aider's responsibility to fill it out if first aid is given. If first aid isn't given, then it's the injured party's responsibility to fill it out. And what advice was given. Again, if it's first aid, you might need to give advice for them to go to hospital, or you might give advice for them to go home and have a few hours rest or whatever. So you want to document sort of treatment and advice. But none of these things have to be overcomplicated. And then as the first aider, it's also your responsibility to make sure you restock anything you've used, which is, good basic logic. But again, that doesn't have to be overthought. I've used some plasters. I'll order a box on Amazon to go back in next time.
It's not the BBC. We don't have to say other sellers are available.
No, I was going to say, I just found it amusing. You wouldn't mention their name, then you just go and drop it straight in there.
That's a bit complicated. But I strongly believe that human nature, we will do things that are easy and we won't do things that are hard. If something is made easy for you, you'll do it. So make it easy. Write it down on scrap of paper and type it up later next time you're on the computer. If you're the employee, send an email. Just send an email to your first aid or your line manager saying this happened, and it can get documented and stored that way. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a book, but it has to be recorded and findable, and it has to be stored, I think, for 7 years. So,
the WhatsApp message does need to be made slightly more official.
Yes, just marginally so. But also, again, if it's your business and there is potential for an insurance claim to come from that, well, you want that done properly anyway, don't you? Because we know insurance companies will look for any excuse not to pay out. So if there's any chance that it might come your way in a negative, then you need to know that you've done that. You need to be able to prove that you've done everything you could, and just write it down. In medicine, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So just write it down.
So I guess there you've said sort of you've done everything you could. So I guess that does lead on to the sort of first aid courses and actually understanding what a first aider can do and should do. Can you perhaps sort of talk us a little bit about what courses you do? And
yeah, so I mean, we're really, really lucky. The training we can offer is immensely varied. We can offer everything from the full level 3. So level 3 is equivalent to an A-level qualification in that it is the level of study. Obviously, it's not equivalent to an A-level qualification because you're not doing it for 3 years or 2 years or whatever, but it's that level of study. That's a full 3-day course in which you cover pretty much every injury you can think of that might come up, as well as some illness like asthma, anaphylaxis, so severe allergic reactions. Course covers briefly on sort of sepsis and infection and those kinds of things.
And so you're saying that perhaps one person on a bigger farm ought to have that qualification.
It's so many. Once you employ so many people, you've got to.
Yeah, the risk assessment. I can't remember exactly what it is. I think it's 30. I think it's 20 staff on a non-risky environment, but fewer staff in a high-risk environment.
Farming's high risk.
Farming's high risk. We've established farming is the most high risk, I think. Yes, you probably want one person to have done that. And we can offer that course. We don't routinely offer it because to get 12 people on the course is challenging. But lots and lots and lots of other people do. And a very simple Google search will find someone in your local area that offers the full 3-day course. And actually, if you had 8 or 10 staff, then I would very, very happily find a way to do it for you. I can do it in a blended format whereby it's a 2-day course and 1 day is done online. There are ways and means to do it.
We should at this point say that obviously we're talking about UK legislation, and I know we have some international listeners. Obviously, follow whatever your international
your local guidelines
your local guidelines.
Absolutely.
Follow them, but obviously the first aid, the health and safety, the dangerousness on farm is relevant to everybody wherever you are.
Exactly. It's not suddenly less dangerous because you're in the sun. So I love that course, but it is quite intensive and 3 days feels a long time. But we can offer that over a 3-month period if you wanted to. Just do 1 day a month. There's ways and means. My favourite course to teach is the 1 day, which is 6 hours. Again, it covers the obvious stuff like resus, CPR, using defibrillators, which of course are so common in the community now. But it doesn't cover some of the more specialist things like catastrophic bleeding and things beyond a very brief, this is what it is.
So you're saying that's a 6 hours with the flexibility. You could do that 3 days, 2 hours a day.
Yeah, the minimum the requirements of my accreditation is that you have to offer it. It has to be a minimum of 2 hour sessions. Personally, I think 3.5.
Better, do it in 2 sessions.
Yeah, just because of the way the course material lies, if I'm 100% honest, actually 3 hours 15 twice gives you time for a little cup of coffee in the middle. And it just falls nicely to stop at a comfortable point.
But again, it can be offered blended, can't it? So is it a couple of hours online and then 4 hours in the classroom?
Yeah, which is, I think that's brilliant if you can. We were talking to a farm recently about doing that. The only challenge with that is that everybody has to do the 2 hours individually before they come into the classroom. And for some people who are maybe less familiar with first aid, it might take them a little bit longer than 2 hours to get through that material. Other people, I think, who are more familiar might get through it quite quickly. So, those blended courses do offer that sort of variation a little bit. We can offer the paediatric course, really useful if you have got kids coming onto the farm regularly to just have someone. And again, the full course is 2 days, which is more for teachers and nurseries and things like that. Or the 1 day course, again, 6.5 hours, or blended at 2 hours online and 4 hours in the classroom. And then we also teach mini medics, don't we? We love that.
Don't say we. I have nothing to do with this.
Tell me, what's mini medics?
So mini medics is a little 3 hour course for sort of 7-ish to 11-ish year olds. And again, it covers CPR and defibrillation and those kinds of things. But it just gives them an early understanding of those topics. And although it's aimed at 7 to 11 year olds, anyone can do it. So if you don't want to have a qualification at the end of it, maybe you're just, you're just a normal human being who doesn't actually get excited by X-rays like I do. You might just want to know what to do in a crisis, and actually 3 hours is great. Just pop in, do a little 3-hour course, and bring your kids, do it all together, and you can go home and learn those skills together.
Well, I was going to say, or the alternatives are, I mean, I did my first aid at Cubs, I did it at Scouts, all of those sorts of things usually offer some kind of first aid training, don't
I
they?
was going to say that's when I first did it, at Brownies and then Guides, and
It is on the national curriculum now as well, which I think is really exciting. Children are learning about first aid from Key Stage 1 now, which is sort of 6 and 7 year olds. And it's just great because it should be natural. It should be part of normal life.
And I guess the earlier you talk about it, the less likely you are to panic in a situation where you come across it.
Yeah, and people will have opinions on this, but I think it's really good because it also introduces them to scary subjects like real illness and death. At the end of the day, you cannot teach someone how to do chest compressions without talking about the fact that you're doing it on someone who is pretty much dead, if not actually dead. It's a really important thing to introduce children to at a young age.
It does make it more, because it just made me think, somebody I remember saying to me that was completely off farm one time, was just talking about it, and you do get a bit, not blasé, but you're used to it on farm. It's the old saying, I know some people hate where there's livestock, there's dead stock. And I was just talking about something, it's like, you talk about death like it's just every day, and I suppose it's different. It's not a person or whatever in the same way. And well, I got, should we say, very emotionally attached to one or two of my cows in the past as well. But but yeah, being on farm, you're used to in that way. It's part of the conversation, isn't it, to talk about, oh, well, cows died or calves died or whatever. We might get upset about it or whatever it happens to be, but it's still part of the conversation that people in the everyday world don't talk about in the same way. You don't normally talk about death unless you might lose a pet, or otherwise it's usually a friend or a family member. It's not talked about in quite the same way. So yes, opening that, making it a more normal conversation is never a bad thing.
And I think we should be aiming to have the largest proportion of the population understanding how to perform CPR. Not everybody is fit enough. It is incredibly hard work. How to access a defibrillator. Where is your nearest? In the UK now, they are everywhere, but actually it's incredibly difficult to find out where they are because there's no national register of them.
Isn't there?
No. So St John's, I think it's St John's Ambulance, or is it British Heart Foundation? British Heart Foundation have an app, but it relies on the owner of the defib to update, to document it, and that feeds into the ambulance service, but not every single one has been documented. So, and then there's another app. So one's called Heartstart, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the other app's called. But I was comparing them just for our town here. And I know where quite a lot are in our town, but I wouldn't say I know where they all are. And they definitely were not all documented on that app. I mean, the one at the funny little hall on the top of the town next to the library, that's not documented on either of the apps.
And it's funny, isn't it, that my other half hadn't done a first aid course ever in his life, and he actually did one back over the summer, never done one at all. And yet most of my life I have been first aid trained, whether that's first aid at work or even the longer courses. And it was I said to him, well, you know where the closest defibrillator to home is? And he went, no, I've got no idea. And it's just like, well, let me tell you. Let me tell you, because I might be the one that needs it. And so I think it's something that I've been aware of, but actually I think it's probably very good practice that each farm knows where the closest defibrillator, I can't even say that word now. Somebody said it for me.
Defibrillator.
Thank you.
Defib
Thank
is
you.
easy.
Yeah. I'll learn that one. If we know where they are, then at least, that's something that you can go and get if you're in that situation. And I think, maybe also, that's something else that goes on a list by the...
You know where it is. How do you get into it?
Yes.
Lots of people wouldn't know what to do to get into it. That you have to ring 999. They have to give you a code to access it. That they 999 can only tell you if they're within a certain, I think it's a 3-minute travel time of where you are. They won't tell you about any outside that time, even though it might still be quicker than waiting for the ambulance. So having that personal knowledge of where it is really important.
I was just thinking, it just comes back in my head, old Vinny with his staying alive.
Yeah. I mean, staying alive, Pink Pony Clubs, Baby
Nelly
Shark.
the Elephant.
Nelly the Elephant's
That's
personal
my
preference.
Yeah.
Baby Shark is a good one.
For
Any
those
of those
that don't know what we're talking about, perhaps we ought to explain. We're not just randomly saying song names.
So the fact you're already going Pink Pony Club, that's only just been out.
Yeah, it's great. Any CPR, you need to be, your chest compressions should be between 100 and 120 compressions a minute with good recoil. So letting the chest come back up. And those are songs that have that sort of beat. So I've always been a counter. I don't actually sing. But lots of my colleagues will sing in their heads whilst they're doing chest compressions.
Should say you're not expecting now to do mouth to mouth, are you?
Yes, it is still part of the regulations.
Right.
And it is absolutely still part of the training. Mouth to mouth in pediatric situations is essential. In pediatric situations, in children, it absolutely cannot be missed, because in children are more likely to collapse and their heart stop because their oxygen levels have dropped. So the mouth-to-mouth gives them that oxygen. In adults, it is still better. It is still needed. The oxygen in your blood will only last a certain amount of time. Chest compressions on their own will keep you going for a short period of time. But with mouth-to-mouth, it will give you longer. Ultimately, chest compressions with or without mouth-to-mouth are not going to work. You need the defibrillator. Chest compressions on their own will only keep someone's heart moving. It will not restart it. Restart's a dodgy word, but it will not. It will not do it on its own. So the chest compressions are about keeping that heart going. Defibrillator is about getting the electrical activity working again.
But it all comes down to, like saying the other thing, saying if you're the first person on the scene, knowing what to do, isn't it? And I know my first aid at work has lapsed, and I need to go on one of these courses. But I know when I was previously employed, I encouraged them that we should do it so that all the staff had first aid, because I might be the first person on farm. I might be the only person that person sees on farm that day. And if I find them in that situation, I need to know what to be able to do.
Absolutely. And I also, the thing I always say, the way I start my courses is to say that anything you do in that situation where hopefully you will see someone collapse, and hopefully that's not the right word, but the best chance for someone is for you to see them collapse and for you to start chest compressions within 30 seconds, preferably 10 seconds if possible, and for you to have called for help. But actually, if the only thing you do for that person is call 999 and get help on the way, you have done something. You have made that person's situation better. But the more you can do, the better still.
I'm going to raise something here that I just made.
Is it going to be controversial?
Not controversial, but I suppose it's maybe the thing some people feel a bit awkward and embarrassed about, especially as farming's diversity has changed, given the conversation we were having.
Are we going to talk about boobies?
No, I was going
to bleep moment.
No, I was going to talk about underwire bras.
Okay. Bras in general, actually,
well, yes.
Underwire is not the problem.
Right.
Women are 25% less likely to be given CPR in public than men, because you need to expose the chest and people are too embarrassed. And there is work going on in the first aid world, silly things like you might go on a first aid course now and your mannequin, Bob, Barry and Bernard in our house, but we need to get a Betty to go with them, they
they have
boobies.
They were very androgynous in my day.
They are currently very androgynous, but you can
you get little inflatable implants or whatever you want to call them.
I'm not going to comment.
But as a female, you know, if it was me that's collapsed, I'd want to make sure that somebody was going to be giving me CPR.
And I
think it's hugely important.
And I think you're pretty much dead. Are you going to care if the world sees your boobs? No, definitely not. I would rather the world saw my boobs at that moment in time. But people are too embarrassed, and it's really, really scary. It's really scary.
I mean, that's significant, isn't it? 25% is...
Yeah, and I've got a feeling I've got that number wrong. I think it's higher. But it doesn't matter.
Whatever it is, it's too many. Yeah, whatever it is, it's too many, yeah.
Women are less likely to collapse, but it's irrelevant. It needs to be done. But like I say, if you're too embarrassed...
I was more thinking about the defib. You've got to get the wire out, haven't you? No?
You just want the bra out of the way. The wire... If your heart has stopped beating, or you know, if it's not working properly, a couple of electrical burns across your underwire, that can be treated, that can be dealt with in the same way that you are reasonably likely to break a rib when you do chest compressions. Who cares? That can be dealt with later.
To get the heart dealt with and going, and worry about potential burns afterwards.
In first aid, you're always dealing with the priorities, ABC, airway, breathing, circulation. You are always dealing with the priorities, and skin is very, very low down the priority list.
First thing I always remember being taught about first aid was don't become the victim yourself.
Yes. Well, okay, Dr. ABC.
Wow.
Danger response. You're going to really push me on it. But it's that looking at the priorities, and the priority is maintaining life and dealing with a wound because you've scraped them with your nail, or dealing with a burn from the defib. I've never seen a burn from a defib, but then I probably have never done, you just remove the bra, just get it off somehow, rip it off, tear it off, cut it off. We would normally cut it off, ignore it until you can deal with it.
But so many things have changed over the years. I remember back when, you used to have to pat people down to take their keys out of their pocket so you didn't bruise them. Now, I'd prefer to just be put into recovery position as soon as possible. I don't care if I've got a slight bruise. No, it's really not the biggest part of my problems, is it?
Exactly that. I mean, those things are nice additions, aren't they? They're little bows on top of the present.
I don't think I'd be worrying if I was the victim.
No, exactly. I mean, we do suggest it still, but don't forget to take off their glasses. Is it the biggest problem at that moment in time? Probably not.
Okay, well, like usual, I'm sort of looking at the time thinking it's time to wrap it up. Are there any more words of wisdom you want to share before we finish?
No, I mean, I think we've covered the important stuff, haven't we? The law says you must provide it. We say you should provide it. We are happy to find ways to help you provide it. We will be as flexible with you as you can be. And if we're not the right training provider for you, we'll direct you to others. Lots of my colleagues provide first aid training in different ways. So just come have a chat with Andrew or me, and we'll give you the advice that we can, really.
I'd say just talk to you, because it's not my area of expertise. Cows, yes, but first aid training is not my area of expertise. That's the whole reason why you joined the business.
Well, yeah, true. But, you know as much as I do in terms of what, where, when, why, how.
I'm picking it up. Sarah, any thoughts?
I think it's just such an important topic that if you've got people on farm that are first aid trained, it could make the difference between life and death. And I think, whilst that is a sobering thought, we do need to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, I'm just thinking, given our experience of, I mentioned Ollie earlier in the fire, those sorts of podcasts and this ones don't get the listen to in the same way, which I think is a shame, because they're such important podcasts in terms of fire or your health and safety, or your first aid, life and death, as you've just put it, that this is something that should be shared. And, we've not just done this because Emma's joined the business. This has been an idea for a podcast long before Emma did this. that we need to share this for people to be aware that I didn't realise there was the legal responsibilities in the way there are since Emma done the course, but there is a moral obligation and well, yeah.
And also, it might be you. You might be the farmer paying for your staff to go off, but what if you're the one that's injured?
Yeah.
You know, you want someone to look after you as much as the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. So really on that, I think it's time to wind it up. So I guess it's a goodbye from me.
And from me.
Oh, and me, I suppose.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for listening to the Chewing the Cud podcast for the UK dairy industry, brought to you from the southwest of England and listened to around the world. Now for the really boring bit, I'm afraid, the legal disclaimer. The information provided during this podcast has been prepared for general information purposes only and does not constitute advice. The information must not be relied upon for any purpose and no representation or warranty is given to its accuracy, completeness, or otherwise. Any reference to other organisations, businesses or products during this podcast are not endorsements or recommendations of Chewing the Cud Limited. The views of Andrew Jones are personal and may not be the views of Chewing the Cud Limited, and the views of Sarah Bolt are personal and may not be the views of Kingshay Farming and Conservation Limited and any affiliated companies. For more information on the podcast and details of services offered by Chewing the Cud Limited, visit www.chewingthecud.com. Thank you and goodbye.